Welcome, listeners. It's a Monday, and I'm here to bring to your lovely ears a duo from the Halls of Fantasy series. Oh yes, nothing like a Monday old-time radio episode. Now, these two I think you'll enjoy. I've managed to find some exceptionally high-quality recordings of these 1950s episodes, and added my own remastering techniques and filters to really bring out the clarity in the voice, while simultaneously reduce the noise, and lower any ear-splitting moments, where possible. Sometimes the audio is mangled in with that ear-splitting sound, so I do my best to decipher that noise. The second story in this episode is a good example of that. There is a level of finesse in doing these episodes, and for my Patreons, I'm going to see if I can upload a bit of the original audio so you can compare. But all around, both these recordings were really good quality. And speaking of awesome people, a big shout out to my Patreons: Matthew J. Bauer, Lee Bauer, Chad Warren, Just Heather, Lorraine Cresanto, Mace Joe, and Peter Raffaelli. With your support, not only are you keeping this show's blood pumping, you're giving the show the opportunity to grow and produce even better content. And as a result, I'm currently working on a new segment in this podcast, but I'll leave it as a surprise for now. Also, my internet is still on the rocks, unfortunately, so I'll get this uploaded ASAP. Now, turn the lights off, the radio up, and get ready for
The Night the Fog Came.
And
The Automaton.
Come with me, my friends. We shall descend to the world of the unknown and forbidden, down to the depths where the veil of time is lifted and the supernatural reigns as king. Come with me and listen to the tale of The Night the Fog Came.
It came from our right. We better take a look. Come on. We're getting close to the lake. Only this fog. Wait a minute. There. Right there. Let's take a look. I hope he's all right. And throw him over. He's dead. I know. Do you realize how he died? What do you mean? Look at him closer, Hal. His clothes aren't wet. Even his hair isn't wet. Look at the water trickling from his mouth. This man died less than a minute ago on dry land, 200 yards from the lake. And he died by drowning.
If the theory of evolution is correct, then there is a connection between the minute organisms which are found to be living in water and life as we know it today. But what connection with us did those things have which came from out of the fog? What connection with human life did those horrible creatures who came from the depths have? And what is their purpose? Why did they suddenly appear and destroy, then vanish as suddenly as they had come? I shall tell you as much as I know about it. Listen to the tale of The Night the Fog Came. The first inkling of their existence came to us as we were going through some routine research. I dropped over to the lab to see Hal. Harold Enroth was perhaps one of the foremost men in his field. Our friendship stretched back for many years. I'd been away for a while, and so I dropped in at the lab to see him one morning.
Jeff, you old dog, you're a sight for sore eyes.
How are things going, Hal?
Fine, couldn't be better. How'd you like your vacation?
I can't wait till next year. I hated to come back.
You know, Jeff, I'm glad you dropped in. I have a little problem.
Oh? What is it, money?
No, not that. Here, I'll show you. Pull those blinds, will you?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have a specimen here on the slide. I want you to take a look at it.
Go ahead. Turn the projector on.
All right. There. What do you think of that?
I don't know. It looks like some form of water life. I don't think I've ever seen it before.
This has been enlarged 100 times. There's no use trying to recognize what it is. It's a form of water life completely unknown to us.
A new form of life. Where did you get this?
It's a specimen of water one of our field researchers took from the westernmost tip of Lake Superior, somewhere near the Wisconsin-Minnesota border.
Have you contacted anyone else about it?
No.
Why not?
Well, it's...
Come on. Don't try to avoid telling me, Hal. We know each other too well for that.
All right. Listen to me, Jeff.
All right.
Everything I say is fact. I've conducted countless tests to discover what I do know about this form of life. That thing is able to reproduce itself.
A Hydra type?
Possibly. That's beside the point right now. What's more important, all trace of the other organisms in that drop of water has disappeared.
Are you serious?
Of course I am. And another thing. There was a little mist hovering above what was left of the water.
A mist?
That's what I call it. Something like fog.
Why, that's impossible.
No, it's not. I know that when the water evaporated, it should have been dispersed into the air. Eventually it was, but not for several hours.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hal. I still can't...
Here, I'll show you. We have a little of the water left. It's over here in this jar. You can see for yourself.
It looks just like ordinary water.
I know it does. But believe me when I say it isn't. Now, it'll take just about 3 minutes. Do you see what's happening?
I can't believe my eyes.
See that little cloud of misty vapor beginning to form like fog?
Yes. But what causes it?
I wish I knew. Our field men say the conditions up there are getting to be unbearable. The whole area for 100 square miles is almost covered completely by this fog.
What are you going to do?
Well, I'm going up there myself. Jeff, if I send for you, will you join me?
Of course.
I may need you. I may need everyone I can get. It's begun to prey on my mind, Jeff. Somehow I think there's something back of this. Something the likes of which the world has never seen. Something evil.
Hal went up there the afternoon of the morning I had seen him. At first he wrote that the reports had been exaggerated. Then he discovered that all traces of the new form of life had disappeared. He decided to return. I was quite glad to get that letter from Hal. Before he had gone up there, he had been quite worried. The only thing I couldn't understand was what had become of the new water life form. The day before he was to return to the city... Hello?
Jeff, this is Hal.
Where are you? I thought you...
I had them put me through direct to you, Jeff. I need your assistance.
What's the matter?
I've already called Arnold Simpson and Jack Rackle. They've agreed to come. I need you too, Jeff, just as soon as you can possibly make it.
Don't worry, Hal. I'll be there.
Remember, as soon as you can possibly make it.
I knew Arnold Simpson, and he and I went up together. The train left Chicago and headed north, and then slightly west over Illinois and Wisconsin. Simpson and I talked it over on our way up there. Hal talked to you before he left, didn't he, Arnold?
Yes, he did. I never had enough time to get up to his lab so he could show me what it was, but his words were description enough. Frankly, I'm worried.
In what way?
Jeff, why should a new form of water life suddenly appear? Why should it destroy everything with which it comes into contact? And why should the mist or the fog appear to be so dense and heavy?
I don't know.
That's just the trouble. We don't know. Where has this form of life been, or did it just develop? What's its reason for being here?
Perhaps we'll find the answers to those questions when we get there, Arnold.
Perhaps. But I'm convinced of this much, Jeff. Whatever it is, whatever that fog is hiding, poses a new problem for us. A problem which may be unsolvable, and which could very well destroy the human race.
Simpson seemed disinclined to talk, and so we spent the remainder of the trip in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts. We arrived at the town and then hired a car to take us to the little village, where we would find Hal Enrum.
The closer we came to our final destination, the darker the sky became, and the air was heavy with a mist which was both damp and clammy. It was an old rickety car, and the roads were little better than the ground on either side of it. The car stopped a few hundred feet from our destination.
You gotta walk the rest of the way.
You said you'd drive us all the way.
Look, mister, I come farther than I was going to in the first place. I ain't in no mood to go into the woods up there. If you're gonna go, then you walk in.
Jeff, can't you do something?
I don't think so.
Here's your pay. Thanks.
Let's go, Arnold. It could be worse, Arnold. I suppose so.
He seemed genuinely afraid.
Aren't you?
A little.
Hey, we must be pretty close to the lake.
I've never seen the fog this thick. It's unnatural.
Eventually, we made it up to the house. Hal was there waiting for us and showed us where we would sleep. Through the window, I could see that the fog seemed to be getting thicker.
That's an eerie, lonely sound. You get used to it after you've been here for a while.
Hal, you wrote me that this fog, the new form of life, had disappeared.
It had. But 2 days ago, it suddenly reappeared. And with it, the fog returned.
Then there must be a connection between the two.
Yes, but what?
I haven't any idea. Look, I have to go down to the village for some food. We don't have enough here to feed 4 of us. Will you come with me, Jeff?
Certainly.
I'll be right back, Arnold. It's only about a mile away near the lake.
Go ahead.
That trip made me tired.
I think I'll take a nap. The house in which we were staying was on a high level of ground which tapered off on the side facing the lake. It was only 3 p.m, but it looked almost as dark as late evening. And there was something about that cloudy mist. It was cold and clammy and smelled strongly of the lake. I don't see how you were able to stand it up here by yourself.
Well, I had a lot of things to interest me.
I was all ready to meet you at the station, but then when I got your call, I didn't know what to think.
I wish I could understand this, Jeff. The fog disappeared when the water life disappeared. When signs of this strange new form of life showed again, the fog came back. Why?
Maybe we can find the answer to that.
I hope so. Surely the sound of that foghorn does get on your nerves.
Yes, I can imagine it would.
You know, if this were a clear day, you could see the village from here.
Oh?
Actually, it's just a tiny resort town for fishermen and hunters. And it's located right on the westernmost tip of the lake. Imagine it must... It came from our right.
We'd better take a look. Come on.
We're getting close to the lake. If only this fog...
Wait a minute. There, right there. Let's take a look. I hope he's all right.
All right. Roll him over.
Okay.
He's dead.
I know. But do you realize how he died?
What do you mean?
Look at him closer, Hal. His clothes aren't wet. Even his hair isn't wet. But look at the water trickling from his mouth. This man died less than a minute ago on dry land, 200 yards from the lake. And he died by drowning.
That's not possible. You sure he drowned?
There must be a doctor down at the village. Let's take him down there and see what the doctor says. Only I'm sure he'll agree with me. Together, we carried the man down to the village. Luckily for us, he was of slight build, not too heavy. It took us almost half an hour to get him down there. When we finally did arrive, it took another few minutes to locate the doctor.
What do you think, Doctor?
Get them out. All right.
Will you please wait outside? The doctor can't work with you in here. He's just like all the others, ain't he, Doc? Please, wait outside.
Thank you. What did he mean by he's just like all the others, Doctor?
Just what he said. Ever since this fog has settled down again, 5 people have died.
All in the same way?
Yes.
You mean by drowning?
That's right.
I can't understand how this man we found could die by drowning when he wasn't in the water. You know, he reached him about a minute after he screamed. How could he drown?
Professor Enroth, I've been asking myself that same question about all the others. I've been almost half insane these past 2 days trying to find the solution.
Dr. Craig, this fog, has it always been like this in the area?
No. Not until about 2 months ago.
Which coincides with the time we first discovered that new form of water life.
What did you say?
Nothing, Doctor. We're doing a little research work up here, that's all.
This keeps up. I'm afraid of what might happen. I've never seen anything like it before. The fog, those deaths, How can they be explained?
We don't know, Doctor. We just don't know. When we got back to the house, we discovered that Simpson had indeed taken a nap. Our arrival must have awakened him, for as we entered, he came slowly down the stairs from the second floor.
Need any help? No, we can manage, but come out to the kitchen with us.
What's the matter with you two? We found a dead man on our way to the village. Are you serious?
Just set those bags on the table.
All right. Oh, I'm not joking, Arnold. We heard a scream. It took us about a minute to get to him. He was dead when we got there.
A knife? Drowned.
What?
On dry land, 200 yards from the lake. You must be insane.
No, it's the truth, Arnold. And there have been 4 other deaths just like it.
When did they happen? In the last 2 days. Since the fog reappeared.
That's right.
Then there is a definite connection between this fog and the new life form you've discovered, Hal.
That's right. But what's the connection?
We'd gotten back to the house about 6 o'clock. It was about 7 that it happened. Simpson said he was going outside for a minute. He opened the door.
I just want to get outside for a minute.
Good heavens. What's wrong? Take a look. Fog, it's so thick.
I've never seen anything like that before. Shut the door. Some of it's getting inside. It's moving along the floor. Just
shut the door.
Did you see it?
Yes, the fog.
Just like it was alive. Moving like a living thing. Creeping along the floor.
When Simpson had opened the door, the fog crept into the house in little wisps that curled and snaked this way and that. It looked like a thing alive.
You saw it, didn't you, Hal?
Yes, I saw it.
What does it mean?
I'm afraid of what it means.
You mean you know?
I hope I'm wrong, but I'm afraid I'm not. It's just possible that this form of life is developed from something that was present in the water all the time. The great brute animals ruled the world before man appeared, and then were destroyed. Eventually, mankind wrested the supremacy of the earth from the other animal and plant life. Perhaps the cycle is to continue. Perhaps, after man, this new form of life.
As the minutes passed by, we noticed that little slips of the fog began inching their way through every opening of the house. It was Simpson who pointed down at the bottom of the door and first brought it to our attention. We began to plug up all the openings in the house. At first, we did it slowly, but as time passed, we worked faster and more feverishly. No matter how tired we became, we had to finish the job, or the fog might claim the house, too. It was too quiet. The only thing we heard was the distant, monotonous call of the foghorn. And then Hal broke the silence.
Do you know why this fog is so thick?
I wish I did.
This might be insane, but it has to be the answer. That fog is carrying moisture, a lot of it, perhaps enough to also carry this new form of life. To move it from place to place, to spread it even farther. To kill everything which stands in its way.
That might be it.
It is, I'm sure it is.
Well, in that case, what happened to break it up the first time?
And that's the solution to the problem. I don't know what it is, but it did break it up the first time. It drove it back, down to the depths from where it came. That's why there was no sign of it in the water.
It came from right outside the house.
Racco. He said he was going to arrive this evening.
We better take a look.
Bring the flashlight.
Right, let's go.
That light doesn't carry more than a few feet. It's so wet out here.
Over there, look.
Little pinpoints of light dancing up and down, all clustered together.
That must be it. Come on. It's spreading out.
Look. There, on the ground. It's Racco.
The same way. Same way as the other one. The little specks of dancing luminescence had withdrawn from Racco's body, but now we noticed that there seemed to be more of them. We carried the body back to the house. We'd forgotten to close the door behind us, and some of the fog had gotten inside. It wasn't too bad, however. Little by little, it began to disperse.
Look out that window.
Yes, I see them. Gathering together with a whole mass, getting larger and larger all the time. Separating like the Hydra. It must be destroyed.
Yes, but how?
They created the fog. That must be the only way they can travel on land. They must have a basic water carrier.
Have you realized what this means?
What are you getting at?
The area this fog now covers is 100 square miles. Every animal in this area may lose its life. And then what happens? They divide again and again and again.
And the area of the fog keeps getting larger all the time. If it isn't stopped now, while we still have a chance, it may never be stopped.
And I ask you the same question, Simpson. How?
I don't know.
Someone's outside. Let him in quickly. They're moving towards the house.
Thank goodness. I didn't think I'd make it.
It's a miracle that you did.
Sit down, Doctor.
Thank you. I was out on a call on my way back to town. I noticed how thick the fog was. And then I noticed the animals lying dead in the forest. The smell of their death was in the air. I continued on towards the town. Then I saw the bodies lying just where they had fallen. The whole town seemed to be covered by a strange luminescent mass, which in some manner moved. I was afraid. Then I thought of you people in this house, and I got here as soon as I could.
I don't know how long we'll be able to withstand them, Doctor. I'm sure the townspeople are dead now. In fact, almost every living creature in the area must be dead.
But what is it? What caused it?
If we get out of this alive, Doctor, we'll tell you.
Look outside. It must have split again. It's twice the size it was.
What are we going to do?
Look under the doorway. They're getting through.
Plug it up. Use some newspaper, clothes, anything with that.
Constant opening and closing of the door. Listen to the other things we had down there.
I think that was...
Look, the things that did get in. First you see their light, and then they're gone. What happens to them?
Perhaps we can't see them.
Or perhaps they die.
Al, wait a minute. Your first letters to me mentioned the fact that the mist had been dispersed. What caused it?
I don't know.
Doctor, you're a native of these parts. Yes. I want you to tell me about anything unusual which happened that day.
Well, I don't remember anything about that day particularly. I remember I was quite pleased to see that the fog had lifted. It was a beautiful day. Unseasonably warm. In fact, the sun was quite hot.
Heat. I wonder if...
If what, Jeff?
These things, these Hydra-type creatures must die in the heat. This house is quite warm. The day the fog was dispersed was warm with a bright sun. Perhaps that's the answer. Doctor, is there any fire break around this area?
Well, there was one cut through the trees several years ago.
Yes.
In case of a fire, a bad one, in the heavy timberlands. Everyone was instructed to get into this area.
In other words, there's a complete fire break around this entire area.
Yes. It comprises about 150 square miles.
And that's it. It's the only chance we have. We'll burn out this area and hope it drives them back.
There's some oil downstairs.
Get it. We'll start the fire here and hope it sets fire to the trees surrounding this house.
Be right back.
We'll have to make a run for it once this place is on fire. We may not come out of this alive, but we can try.
The last. Good. Now, everybody knows what...
You'd better light it. Those things outside, they're going to get in.
Each man will carry a torch.
Yes.
All right, light your torches.
All right.
And then set fire to this house.
Lighting mine.
All right. And yours. All right. One more.
Under the door. They're pouring in under the door.
Set the house on fire.
Get out of here!
No matter what happens, keep holding those torches. They're afraid of fire. All right, make a run for it.
The fire caught hold, and the entire area was burned out. A week later, the smoke had cleared, and the fire was out. There was no sign of the fog, which had meant death to so many things. I had caught a glimpse of the doctor. He had dropped his torch, and it had gone out. He was immediately engulfed in those luminescent killers. I'm going back up there with Enroth and Simpson, though there is now no trace of those things in the water. Still, we know they lurk somewhere, waiting for their moment. We must destroy them, once and for all, before that moment arrives.
So runs the tale of The Night the Fog Came.
All characters and events portrayed on these programs are fictional, and any resemblance to places or actual persons living or dead is purely coincidental. Featured in this program were Harry Elders as Jeff Kellick, Richard Thorne as Hal Enroth, Jim Andelin as Arnold Simpson, and Sam Siegel as the Doctor. Original music moods were created and performed by Harold Turner. Sound effects by Lloyd Knight and Wayne Dickinson. Your announcer is George Bauer. These programs are directed by Leroy Gallagher, written and produced by Richard Thorne.
The Automaton.
I first met Dr. Eric Ziegler at the Conference on Scientific Research. I knew of him, of course. His name was famous throughout the world as one of the foremost experts on automatic control. It was the closing session of the conference when he made his now famous speech.
And in conclusion, gentlemen, may I say that mankind can expect his technological advance to continue. He can look forward to the future in the secure knowledge that his life will become easier and longer through the advances we make. That he will be free to direct his energies towards the conquering of new frontiers, bringing him closer to the day, and he will stand alone over all the universe. Bravo!
His speech so aroused me that I couldn't help making my way to the speaker's platform, pushing my way through the crowd which surrounded him in order to congratulate him.
Congratulations, Dr. Ziegler.
Dr. Ziegler?
Yes?
My name is Drake Sheridan. I just wanted to tell you I thought your speech was the best thing I've ever heard.
I take that as a compliment coming from you, Dr. Sheridan. I know about your work.
Oh, nothing at all compared to yours, sir.
Dr. Sheridan, I'd like to talk to you further. Why don't you come to my house this evening?
What time?
After dinner, about 8:30. Here's my card.
Well, thank you, sir.
You'll be there?
Of course.
I'll see you then.
Yes?
I came to see Dr. Ziegler.
Oh, your name?
Drake Sheridan.
Oh, yes. He's been expecting you. Won't you come in?
Thank you.
Just follow me.
Was the most interesting effect of all. A new paragraph. The success of the automaton of which I am speaking is dependent upon the excellence of the brain I can give him. My work has become so...
Dr. Sheridan is here, Father.
Oh, excuse me. I do hope you'll forgive me, Dr. Sheridan.
Of course, sir.
I was dictating my report on a project on which I am now working. Please be seated. And before I forget, this is my daughter, Elizabeth.
How do you do?
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Drink, perhaps, Dr. Sheridan?
Yes, I could stand one.
Yes. Any particular preference?
No.
Would you do the honors, Elizabeth?
Of course, Father.
Dr. Sheridan, perhaps you're wondering why I asked you to come here.
I have been, but I consider it a privilege and an honor to be here.
Thank you for the compliment, but it wasn't necessary. You may be interested to know that I've followed your career quite closely. And from what I've gathered, you're a very intelligent young man.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ziegler.
I'm not complimenting you to make you feel comfortable, Dr. Sheridan. I mean what I say.
Exactly why did you ask me here, Dr. Ziegler?
To talk to you, to see what kind of a person you are.
And here are your drinks.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, my dear. That's just right, Elizabeth. Yes. Dr. Sheridan, I'm going to be completely frank with you. I am working on a private project financed with my own money, completely divorced from my work at the Research Institute.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter has been helping me with this work, but unfortunately she does not have the knowledge nor the training to be of anything more than elementary assistance.
I see.
I am interested in finding an assistant who will devote his full time with me to the work I am doing.
You mean you intend to leave the Institute?
Yes. My work is finished there, and besides, I want to devote more time to this particular project of which I'm speaking.
What's the nature of your work?
Automatic control, of course. Would you be interested in working with me?
It's a great honor, sir.
I will make it worth your while.
Well, I'd like to know exactly what you're working on before I make any decision.
I believe I can trust you. I have a building some miles outside of the city which serves as my own personal research laboratory. We might as well drive out there. That is, if you're interested.
Why, certainly am.
Good. Elizabeth, get the car from the garage, please. We'll drive out tonight.
You certainly have it well equipped, Dr. Ziegler.
I wanted to show you that you would be working with only the finest of equipment.
Who's there?
What's that?
Oh, that's the watchman.
It's nothing to worry about, Bart.
Oh, it's you, Dr. Ziegler. I didn't hear you come in.
It's all right. He'll check out with you when we leave.
All right, sir.
Will you open the door, Elizabeth?
Of course.
All right, let's go in. I'll put on the lights. Now you'll see what I've been working on for the past year.
That sheet-draped figure on the table over there, what is it?
My newest research project in automatic control.
But what?
You'll see.
It looks like a human body underneath that sheet.
Not quite. Here, I'll pull back the sheet.
No, it isn't a human body.
That's correct. What do you think of it, Sheridan? What do you think of my automaton?
Is it finished?
Not yet, but soon, with your help.
A mechanical man. A robot shaped exactly like a human being.
What better form could I give him? After all, our own bodies evolved to what we are today. Why should I attempt to improve on nature?
What do you intend doing with him when you finish?
Tell him, Elizabeth.
Well, this automaton will be able to do all of the hard and painstaking work of mankind without ever getting tired. It can fight his wars. It can be the first to explore outer space. It can free mankind to direct his energies to other channels.
I don't know.
Oh, come, Sheridan. You look at the automaton as if you thought he was some Frankenstein monster. Believe me, this is the farthest thing from that imaginary creature. This is a work of science. This is not a monster created from the dark recesses of someone's imagination. This is our key to the future.
Dr. Eric Ziegler, his daughter, and I stood looking down at the metallic figure lying on the table before us. In all respects, it resembled a man, a metal and plastic man, created by the genius of Ziegler.
This is our key to the future. This automaton will free man from labor. Let him develop his mind to the fullest.
How much longer do you think you'll have to work before it's finished?
I can't tell. That's why I need you to help me set up the automatic self-regulation of its brain.
Then you haven't developed the system of feedback yet?
No. As you are aware, that is the basic machine of all self-regulating systems of automatic control. A man's mind is a complex creation. The mind of the automaton must also be complex in order that it can do the work of a man, in order that it can think and regulate itself.
Why don't you show him what you've accomplished so far in the feedback system?
All right. Now, over here is what I call its brain. Put the power on, Elizabeth.
Yes, Father.
I've only begun on the binary system. But watch. It's moving. It's sitting up. Yes. It's getting down off the table. And now you'll see a sight that no one else has ever seen before. It's walking around the laboratory. Yes. You're witnessing the first movements of a new creation, superior to man, and that it will never tire, servant to man. But that will be its place in the future. A machine that looks like a man and will be able to think like one. I shall return him to the table now. It's climbed back up on the table, and it's lying down again. All right, turn off the power, Elizabeth. Well, Sheridan, what do you think now?
I'm afraid I don't know what to think.
Will you work with me?
Oh, yes. Who wouldn't jump at the chance? Of course I will.
Good.
You understand, of course, that the feedback system and the binary scale are still in their elementary stages. When the brain, the automatic control is finished, it will fit inside the automaton's body and head.
That's correct. There will be controls on the robot's chest to set the automatic control to working, and another to stop the machine if it needs to be repaired.
Of course, our largest task will be to develop a complete automatic self-regulatory system to fit inside the robot body. As soon as you can be free...
Which should be in about 2 weeks.
Good. Then we shall begin work on the final stages that will lead to the completion of the Automaton.
Rather than completely sever my relations with the organization for which I worked, I took an extended leave of absence. There were living quarters in the laboratory in the country. Ziegler shut down his house in the city, and he and his daughter and I moved our belongings to the laboratory in order to devote every possible minute to our work. Not only was Ziegler intent on having the automaton think for itself, but he was also insistent that the robot be able to talk. To those ends, we went to work.
If we were right in our calculations, the amplifier and receiver we have built into the mechanism will convert our words into electrical impulses, which in turn will activate a response from the automaton. Those responses themselves will be electrical impulses, which will be converted into words.
Well, why don't we try it and see, Eric?
We might as well, I suppose.
After all, the automatic control is almost finished. We only have the more complex reactions to set in the binary scale.
All right. Turn the control on his chest.
Right. It's on.
We'll see what happens. I order you to sit up.
Sitting up?
Yes. Jump down to the floor. I want you to answer me with your voice. What have you been created for?
To kill.
That's not the right reaction.
What was that?
Correction. To work.
That's right.
We must have made a mistake somewhere along the line in the reactions we set up. That to kill value is present for only one situation, for personal protection.
Muffin, what are you doing?
Well, we're just conducting a test.
Woman.
That's correct.
Woman.
Stay back. Stay away from me.
Elizabeth, be quiet. He wasn't going to hurt you.
I'm sorry. When he started toward me, it frightened me.
You see, he stopped now. There's nothing to fear.
Nothing to fear.
Get back. Back to the table. Lie down again. Turn off the control, Drake. What's the matter, Elizabeth? You're shaking.
It's just that thing frightened me so. Those lenses that it has for eyes, there's something hypnotic about them. He looks so much like a man. I know he's made of plastic and metal, but well, I fear him.
Elizabeth, there's no sense getting emotional about this. There's nothing to be afraid of.
I know you're right, Father, but...
But what?
But what would happen if you ever lost control of the automaton?
That will never happen.
But is it possible?
Perhaps.
We didn't do any more work on the automaton that day. We went into the city in the early evening to see a play, leaving the watchman at the laboratory to take care of things. We got back about 12 and were having a late snack.
More coffee, Drake?
Oh, yes. Please.
I think it did us good to get away from here this evening. We've all been working too hard. Do you feel better now, Elizabeth?
Oh, yes, Father, much better.
Yeah. Tomorrow we can finish up with the automaton. Then we can show him, after suitable tests, of course, to the world.
If we're successful, you ought to win a prize.
What was that?
Someone screamed.
It came from upstairs. We'd better take a look. Who could it have been?
The only other person up there is Bert, the watchman.
There it is again. Hurry.
Look, the door to the laboratory is... It's open.
He must be in there.
The lights are on.
We'll see what's wrong in a second.
All right.
Oh, no.
It's Bert.
What's the matter with him?
His neck's been broken.
Oh.
He's dead.
But how?
I don't know, only
What's the matter?
Look, we turned off the control on the robot when we left, didn't we?
Of course we did. Why?
Because now it's on, Eric. The control is on. On the floor of the laboratory sprawled the broken body of Bert, the night watchman. A scant few feet away, I stood looking down at the inert form of the automaton. Before we had left the laboratory, we had turned off the control, and now we found it on.
But that isn't possible.
Take a look for yourself.
The control is on.
But we turned it off before we left.
Are you sure?
Of course, I turned it off myself.
How did it get on?
Perhaps Bert turned it on.
Why should he do that?
Perhaps he was curious. But the most important thing to find out is what killed him.
The robot.
Don't be a fool, Elizabeth. The robot won't kill unless attacked.
That's right, Elizabeth. It's the only reason for it to kill. Actually, the reaction was set in the control system for self-preservation. For no other reason than that. It's the only time the automaton is dangerous.
Maybe you made a mistake when you set the automatic controls.
It's possible that we might have made an error in the feedback system, Eric, and that the automatic selector chose the wrong value. When Bert turned the switch on, the robot thought he was in danger and killed him.
We didn't make an error in the feedback system, Drake. We checked each value through 5 times before we placed it in the servo mechanism. You know that as well as I do.
Then how did Bert die?
I don't know.
Master of Men.
It's still on. Turn it off.
Did you hear what it said, Eric?
Master of Men.
We didn't set that reaction in the servo mechanism. Something's wrong.
Do you mean the automaton can think for itself?
What about it, Eric?
We'll dismantle it tomorrow morning and check it over thoroughly, just to be sure.
What about Bert?
We'll merely explain to the authorities that he died in an accident here at the laboratory. We can do that in the morning, too. Now we all need a good night's sleep.
Don't you think we ought to move him out of here?
Well, they may want to look at his body, Elizabeth. Besides, nothing more can happen to him. Elizabeth?
Who is it?
Drake. What are you doing up here on the second floor outside the laboratory?
I couldn't sleep.
Oh. Well, neither could I.
Drake, do you think that the robot can operate by itself?
Why do you ask that?
I was thinking, what if Bert was merely making his rounds? What if he walked into the laboratory and the robot was there, waiting for him?
Well, that's not possible, of course.
I wouldn't say that. Isn't it possible that you and Dad might have made a mistake in setting up the feedback system? Isn't it possible that there could be an error in the automatic control system that would allow it to operate without being switched on? Operate enough to at least turn the operating switch on?
Well, it's possible that there's something comparable to a short in the control system, which would mean that the robot could operate without the control being on. Yes.
I want to go in there and take a look at it.
Why don't you wait until morning?
No, I want to see it tonight.
All right. Let's go. Are you sure you want to go inside?
Yes.
Switch on the lights.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everything seems to be all right.
Let's take a look at the automaton. Every time I see it, it frightens me.
There's nothing to be afraid of, Elizabeth.
I'm not so sure.
The control button is still off.
Wasn't he lying the opposite way? With his head at the other end of the table when we left?
No, I don't think. Where's that hum coming from?
I don't know.
Sounds like the robot's power system. Yet the control button is off.
Are you sure?
Let me get a little closer to it.
Well?
The hum is coming from the automaton.
That means I was right.
I guess you...
Drake!
Huh?
Look out!
Master of men!
The system is on.
It's sitting up!
To kill!
We made a mistake. We must have made a mistake.
It's getting down!
Let's get out of here.
Is it following us?
No, it's just standing there. But it will be after us in a few seconds.
Hurry, hurry.
Let's get this door closed and locked.
I can see it through the glass panel. It's starting towards the door.
I heard some noise up here.
What's the matter? The automaton's in operation, without the control being on.
What?
That's right. We must have made a mistake, Eric. The only thought that thing knows is to kill. We have to destroy it.
It's getting closer to the door.
That door won't hold. Let's get out of here. It has to be destroyed.
But how? It weighs over half a ton.
I think I have it. Stop here by this window.
Oh, another crash against that door and it'll be out of the lab.
What are you going to do?
Its reactions are slower than ours. We'll wait here for it. It'll come walking towards us. At the last minute, we'll run to the side. I don't think it'll be able to stop itself in time. It should crash through the window and to the ground below. The two-story drop should destroy it.
The door's down!
I hope your plan works.
And if it doesn't?
Then we'll have to think of something else.
Here it comes.
It's looking up and down the hallway for us.
Over here! Over here!
It sees you.
Here it comes.
To kill.
It's getting closer.
When do we move away?
Not yet. Master of men, kill all men.
Only a few feet from us.
How soon? In a moment.
To kill.
Now!
Are you sure it's destroyed?
Yes. The fall completely destroyed the automatic control. You're looking at nothing but a pile of metal.
What do you intend doing?
Starting all over again. Somewhere along the line, we made a mistake. We have to find that mistake and correct it. We don't want a master of men, but a servant of men. Someday, I don't know when, but someday, we'll be successful. And then one of mankind's most useful servants will be the Automaton.
How to beat the Sandman. Having difficulty staying awake there? Trying to study for some big exam? Finish some last-minute assignment that you put off all weekend? And it's now 3 in the morning, and you're absolutely exhausted? Or perhaps you were in a similar state recently, and are looking for help on what to do. Well, friend, I have just the prescription to ease your weary mind. All you need to do is win a game. Setting up the game is relatively simple. All you need is an hourglass, a candle, and a marker. Let me make one thing specifically clear. You need an hourglass, not one of those rinky-dink 30-second pieces of shit you get out of a cereal box or board game. Before playing the game, test your hourglass to make sure that it takes an hour or slightly longer to drain out all of the sand from one section to the other. Having it take slightly longer will help, but too long or too short, and you'll run into complications during the game. You must also be completely alone in the room while playing. When you are ready to play, choose any room that can be sealed, simply meaning that all doorways and windows can be closed. Any other form of timekeeping device or alarm must be taken out of the room prior, or the game will not begin. The hourglass will be your only time tracking tool, hence why having an accurate hourglass is important. Anything with an electronic display should also be removed. This includes TVs, cell phones, computer monitors, anything. Leaving them in the room during the game will put you at a massive disadvantage. You may begin the game at 8 PM. Make sure the room is sealed, drawing the curtains to block any outside light. Then draw a simplistic hourglass shape on the back of one of your hands. Make sure to remember well which hand it was, since you'll mostly be in the dark for this game. Take the candle and light it. Then turn off the lights and sit down on the floor with the 3 previously mentioned objects close together. And flip the hourglass so the sand begins to fall into an empty half. The only source of light should be your candle. Now, yell something along the lines of, "I'm not tired, and I refuse to go to sleep." Close your eyes to the count of 10 and open them again. You won't be entirely sure, but somewhere in the room, you'll think you can see the shadowy outline of a man. You have now begun the game, and your opponent is none other than the master of sleep himself, the Sandman. Do not provoke him, and do not speak to him either. You've challenged him, and in a way insulted him about his profession. So he's not in the best of moods, to say the least. Now comes the game. Your task is to stay awake as long as possible, to a maximum of 8 hours, which will take you to 4 AM. Every hour you must flip the hourglass to reset it and keep the game going. Each time you flip the hourglass, you may take the marker and draw a tally mark on your arm. The specifics of which arm you mark will be explained later. And don't think you can just flip the hourglass 8 times really quick, or just draw 8 lines on your arm. The hour needs to pass in order for the magic to work. If you fail to flip the hourglass before the very last grain of sand falls, or should you succumb to sleep, you will lose. During this time, the Sandman will be deploying as many tricks as possible to get you to fall asleep, or to give in. See, the bottom half of your hourglass at any time represents his power. The more sand in it, the stronger his influence will be. Almost immediately upon starting, you will begin to feel drowsy. This is merely his presence. If you can't last against this, stop playing immediately. During the first hour, he won't do a lot. He may walk around the room, but he won't touch you or speak to you. Even if you try to talk to the being, which is something you should really avoid doing, there will be no response. Also, don't move from your spot to approach him. The closer you get, the more drowsy you will become. And if you're not near your candle, he may put it out so you can go to sleep. Do not distract yourself during this time. You may easily lose track of time and forget to flip the hourglass on time. The Sandman can also skew your perception of how much time has passed, but he cannot affect the hourglass. So keeping your focus on that is your best chance of winning. Side note, if you try to leave the room, you will find that the doors are all locked, and the windows reveal nothing but an unyielding darkness as far as you can see. After you pass the first hour, the Sandman may scoff, but will continue to stay in the room. Now, he will begin to pull more from his bag of tricks. He's seen that you're going to be a hard one to put down. The sounds of music boxes and harps may be heard, at first from a distance, but will slowly grow to a level that would be audible and comforting. Resist the urge to close your eyes and listen. Your body will grow weary as you approach hour 2 or 3, depending on how the Sandman is feeling that night. Around this point, he will begin speaking to you in many voices. The soft voice of a young girl, the wise cackling laugh of a grandparent, or perhaps even in the ever-loving, recognizable words of your own mother. They will try to congratulate you on surviving for so long with the Sandman, for braving sleepless days and nights to win this game. Whispers of lullabies and nursery rhymes will fill your head. But you know better. Say nothing, and ignore the voices. No matter how real they may seem, don't listen to them. Do not go to sleep. If you manage to make it to the halfway point, and now have 4 marks on your arm, you'll be nothing less than exhausted, and the Sandman will be nothing less than enraged. He will begin to manipulate your environment even more, and start using new tactics to get you to sleep. Instead of trying to lull you to sleep, he will attack you. Hallucinations will occur. You'll see horrifying images of the dead hanging from the ceiling, flashed by a spotlight of unknown origin. The room may start to close in, and then stretch out and close in again, and stretch back out. A whisper in your ear will turn into shouting in your face from an invisible source. Already weakened and sleep-deprived, your remaining energy will be drained in bursts from his terrors. You may have sudden adrenaline rushes, sure, but the Sandman is clever. He'll time them so that you can't just survive to the next hour by simply being anxious. He'll wait until your emotional state has fallen just another level lower. And then, bang! 2 rotted feet dangling in front of your face. You can scream all you want. You can beg for him to stop, but this will only use up more of your ability to function. At the 6-hour mark, the hallucinations will shift between horror and comfort, while the Sandman will begin to pick your brain and find what nightmares caused you to come to a cold sweat many a night. Others will coax you towards slumber, claiming that you've put up with enough and that you deserve your rest. A warm bed to tuck yourself into, a pillow made from the softest of furs and feathers. The harps and music boxes will start to overload your sense of hearing. In your state, you may welcome the chance to sleep, but snap out of it. Have you been watching the hourglass? Make sure his terrors aren't distracting you. This is why you don't talk to the Sandman. For every tiny detail about yourself you give him, he will use against you here. This is also the part where electronic displays can become a massive problem. They will turn on, regardless of whether they are powered or not, and should you gaze upon their mystifying image for too long, your eyelids will droop, and your body will collapse onto the floor. If you had just turned the screens away, the Sandman might use some muscle and turn it back towards you, so you can get a better view. The curtains may open to a brilliant dawn or a clear blue sky, but the only truths in this room are your arm and the hourglass. Unless you have 8 marks, this game is not over. Use any ounce of strength you have to flip that hourglass. Now, an immense chore from the Sandman's influence. Scroll a line down your arm with the marker, even if it looks like you're taking a knife and slashing your own arm open. During the final hour, the Sandman will begin to address you directly. asking you questions that appear to be simple. But as you are, you can't even remember what 2 + 2 equals. A question is the hardest thing to get out of your head, so don't let it get in. Cover your ears and just watch the hourglass. Keep those eyes open. Don't fall asleep. If the question gets in your head, you'll start to think about it, adding more stress and draining you of what little mental will you have left. It might become hard to breathe, as if something is squeezing your lungs out, or the air is dense and hard to take. The Sandman will also get physical, grabbing you and throwing you across the room, leaving you to crawl back to the hourglass before time is up. If you catch a glimpse of his face, it may be enough of a nightmare to haunt you and keep your eyes from shutting. There will be no distinguishable facial features save 2 bloody eyes, the lids torn from their sockets, endlessly staring. If you can't take it anymore, at any point before the 8th hour is completed, take the hourglass and break it with all your might. Both sections must be broken for the game to end. For your sake, I hope it was made of glass. Anyone who has made it to the 7th hour mark has never had the strength to successfully break it, and either carried on or surrendered to their dreams. You will not receive a reward for ending the game this way, save the mercy of avoiding the Sandman's wrath. If you do make it to the end of the 8th hour without falling asleep, you will not need to flip the hourglass again. Simply make the 8th mark on your arm and close your eyes. Though you ended the game, you cannot sleep just yet. There's one final task remaining. All you must do is wait for the Sandman to collect the hourglass and say,
"You're all grown up now. Sleep when you wish."
Open your eyes and find that the hourglass is gone and the candle put out. Now, you may collapse in slumber. A 12-hour slumber, to be precise. The game puts a heavy strain on your mind and body, so recovery is necessary. But it's the last sleep you'll ever need, or at least to that length, because once you're fully recovered, you will be able to stay awake for an extra hour for each tally on your marked arm. Depending on your normal sleep schedule, this may mean you only need a small nap, maybe an hour or 2 at most, but for some, you'll never have to lie down again. Sure, you will have the ability to do so if you want. You can even still dream, but there will never be any weariness following you. Just think of how productive you can be. But it's not all sugar plums and gumdrops. If you mark any tallies on your arm that was not marked by the hourglass, you will instead require more sleep. 1 hour for each tally on the blank arm, to be precise. You will require more rest to be able to even function throughout your day. Now, these marks can cancel with the ones on your marked arm, but if that's not the case, you may have just gone through all that suffering, only to come out worse than before. And what with your delirious state throughout the game, it's unlikely for the average individual to come out with all their tallies on the marked arm. There are also the circumstances of losing. If you fail to flip the hourglass, then the Sandman will gain full power, and with a snap of his fingers, you will collapse to the ground. Regardless of how you fall asleep, be it by failure of the hourglass or succumbing to your own tiredness, you will also sleep for 12 hours to recover. But it will be the worst sleep you will ever have, and the Sandman will make damn sure that's the case. The worst nightmares will flood your mind, leaving you unable to escape, or wake up in a relief-filled cold sweat. All you can do is endure the torture of a dream that feels like years in length. And when you finally come to consciousness the next morning, there you will be, lying on the floor of the room, the marks still on your arm, and blood flowing where your eyelids once rested. You said you refused to close your eyes and to go to sleep. The Sandman has simply granted that wish. Written by RedNovaTyrant. Berries. When I was younger, my family and I lived in a rural part of the state that didn't see much of civilization. We lived in a small hamlet of about 93 people across nearly 40 square miles. It was set back in the woods, and at times was a mystical place during my childhood, and at other times it was downright terrifying. Our community, if you want to call it that, was strung together with a network of unkept dirt roads that the Count had long forgotten. Potholes and boulders lined the sides of the roads, and it wasn't uncommon for overgrowth to make passage impossible until someone chopped it away. It was on one of these roads on a late June afternoon that the story begins. My brother and I had just finished a triathlon of basketball, catch, and playing in the pool. After we dried off, our parents told us to get dressed. We were going blackberry picking. One of the perks of the overgrowth on the roads was that a large portion of it was blackberry bushes, and being on the roadside and not on anyone's property, we were free to legally pick as many as we wanted. My brother and I lit up at the news because the blackberry haul each year was turned into jams and cobblers, and also just eaten after only being washed. Blackberries were our candy. We dressed down in our thorn-resistant wear, cotton long sleeves and denim jeans. It was late enough in the afternoon that the heat of the day had dissipated to a comfortable 72 degrees, so the full-body clothing wasn't too much of a hassle. My brother and I each grabbed a bucket, one of those cheap Walmart Easter buckets, and we all loaded into the van. My dad drove us down the road to our normal blackberry spot, and we all got out of the car. "Don't wander off too far," Mum told us as my brother and I searched for the optimum patch of berries. We expected big, juicy berries that would inevitably stain our hands and probably be thrown at each other in jest. But what we found was disappointment. What berries there were dried and shriveled black husks that had been subject to the heat of the past few days. What hadn't been claimed by the sun had been carried off by the birds. We looked for a few more minutes, going deeper into the brambles. Perhaps because it was so thorny, the birds hadn't come in here, nor had the sun reached through the thicker canopy. But still, the only berries we found were of the shriveled and dried sort. I gazed, disheartened, into the thick of the woods past the brambles. I imagined that there was something out there, waiting for us, to cross the thorny threshold into its territory. The berries may have dried up, but we were two plump, juicy kids, ready to be eaten by a beast with innumerable teeth. Bruh! I shook the thought from my head, telling myself that it was nonsense and that I was almost 13 and needed to remove such childish thoughts from my head. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. The woods held wonder and magic, but they also concealed the things that lurked in the shadows beyond the reach of human sight. Having successfully spooked myself, I nudged my brother and told him we should go back and tell our parents of our findings. He agreed, slightly irked that our endeavor had yielded such poor results. We dozed our way through the brambles, stomping down dead vines and pushing aside the thorny branches that tried to catch us. I emerged on the roadside with numerous scratches on my hands, but it wasn't any different than any other year, so I held little worry. We had tried wearing gardening gloves one year. We either ended up crushing the berries, or the gloves snagged on the thorns. Either way, we decided that bare hands was the way to go, so we suffered the scratches in exchange for the berries. Mum and Dad were leaning against the van, buckets at their feet, talking. They saw us and asked if we had found anything. Our harvest was mirrored by theirs. We all climbed back into the van and decided to drive up and down the road until we found another patch of berries. I gazed out the window the whole time, imagining the beasts I had thought up sprinting through the woods, catching the scent of my thoughts and following us. It was insatiable, and wouldn't stop chasing us until our meat was in its belly. I shook my head again to clear my mind. I shook my head again to clear my mind. Too much Stephen King, I thought. After circling back and taking a different route, we found a patch of berries that boasted full, almost bursting fruit. My spirits soared as I saw the berries, my mind washing away all thoughts of the nameless horrors with visions of cobbler and jam. Childish excitement flooded my veins as I practically leaped from the van. My mother sent out the same warning as before, and we absent-mindedly agreed as we rushed over the ditch and into the brambles. The berries were huge, at least the size of a quarter. Some of them were almost past ripe, and the juices were starting to spill from the splits in the flesh. These didn't go into the buckets, but rather were eaten right there. We were young and lived in the middle of nowhere. Eating unwashed fruit wasn't a concern we had. The amount of berries we gathered were huge. In only 5 minutes, I had completely covered the bottom of my bucket by about an inch. I moved to another berry bush when a scent stopped me in my tracks. It was bitter, sweet, and smelled salty. I called to my brother and asked him if he could smell that. He sniffed the air and made a face. We had trouble placing it at first, but then we remembered one day at school when a classroom's air conditioner had broke and the same smell filled the room. Sour water. As we moved further into the berry patch, the stench strengthened. Despite the fact that the berries were a lot bigger here, we decided to turn back and go find another area. We retraced our steps and found ourselves back at the roadside. We heard our parents romping through the berry bush and decided to try and catch up with them. They had almost filled a bucket between them and jokingly asked why they were so far behind. I told them about the sour smell and they advised us to stay away from it. Wanting to fill our buckets, we joined them in their harvest. The berries in this area were large as well, but the stench wasn't present. We trudged nearly 100 feet from the road into the brambles before we came upon a property marker. We decided to go no further, and instead, my parents suggested that we look where my brother and I had stopped, despite their previous advice. I brought this up to them, but they waved it off as the whole "we're adults, we know what we're doing" thing. So, like dutiful soldiers, my brother and I followed our parents into the fray of brambles and thorns. After 5 minutes of picking, our parents led us to the spot where we had stopped picking. The smell lingered in the still summer air. My dad sniffed and said that it was nothing to worry about. It was just the smell of standing water. My mum's eyes grew wide at the size of the berries, exclaiming how good they would taste in a cobbler. The thought of the dessert wiped away the doubt that lingered in the back of my head, and we began to pick. We picked until each of us had a full bucket, and still more taunted us as they hung from the vine that had grown unchecked. Mum picked a berry off and plopped it in her mouth, smiling at the sweetness of it. Dad followed suit, as did my brother and I. A regular blackberry has a pleasant sweetness with a small tinge of bitter, but these were like globs of honey. A single berry seemed sweeter than the entire haul that we had gathered so far. Its nectar flooded my mouth and threw a smile upon my face as my eyes widened at the taste. The aroma, the chewed fruit filled my nose as I reached for another berry, another and another. 10 minutes must have passed, as we mindlessly gorged ourselves on the fruit, mindless of anything else. Popping one final berry into his mouth, my brother looked up at the darkening sky. The sun was setting. We had come out to the patch at around 4 o'clock. Had we really been picking berries that long? My dad made note of this, and we all packed into the van. Our bellies full and our spirits happy. We didn't eat supper that night instead. We just put all of our haul into colanders and washed them in the sink, leaving them to drain overnight. I fell into a deep sleep that night. I remember because it was the last restful sleep I would get for a while. The next morning, I made my way into the kitchen where our parents were bagging, smashing, and cooking the berries. The bagged berries would be frozen and be eaten as snacks. The smashed would go on to become cobblers and jams, the latter of which would be sold to our neighbors, and the cooked berries were being reduced down to a syrup for later during breakfast. I asked them if they needed help, and they said they had it. So I woke up my brother and convinced him to go on a walk through the woods with me. When we set out amongst the trees, the sun had just started to crest the clouds of the morning. Through the green of the sparse canopy, the sky burned a magnificent pink, as the morning stars faded from view and the moon stood solitary in the earth shine. The air was fresh, as it usually was in the woods, and was still cold. Birds tweeted as we made our way through the woods, no real goal in mind for the hike. We each found a wizard staff, a gnarled tree branch to use as a walking stick, and we moved deeper into the forest. The canopy was thicker here, and the sky had begun to take on the pale blue of morning as the pink melted away into the scattered clouds. We came across a creek that bubbles through a trench in the earth, and started throwing pebbles in it. I heard the crumple of leaves and was immediately snapped out of my serene mindset as visions of the nameless beasts from the berry patch flooded my thoughts. I saw it in my head to be lurking behind us, its claws extended from marred hands and its shoulders hunched in anticipation, waiting for the right moment to attack. It was angry. I knew that we took its berries. It was what we had smelled yesterday when we were picking. We took its food, and now we were the food. I tensed up as I imagined it slowly creeping up behind us, yellow drool dripping from its rotten teeth, its eyes filled with sick and hatred, and an insatiable hunger in its belly. I couldn't take it anymore, and I whipped around, ready to face the beast. Nothing. A sigh of relief removed most apprehension, but not all. It was then that my brother groaned. He was on the ground, sitting in a fetal state, clutching his stomach. I dropped the pebbles in my hand and skittered over to him, alarmed. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" He battered me away and bent over to his hands and knees. He yelled in pain as he clutched his stomach with one hand, and a sudden spout of vomit erupted from his mouth. I reeled back in horror as it splashed into the creek. His whole body heaved as he collapsed onto his face, puke ejecting from his mouth and nose and mixing with dirt. I tried to lift him up, but he feebly battered me away, grumbling something incoherent, before another vocal explosion of vomit oozed out of him. He tried to sit up, but the way he clutched his stomach told me that he was in too much pain to do so. Instead, as I stood there watching like a helpless fool, he smothered his face into the vomit mud as more and more flowed from him, with each violent retch like pus from an infection. Tears streamed down his and my own face as I watched my brother wriggle in his own vomit, unable to move due to the pain. I stood in fear, unsure what to do, and then it hit me. At first I thought the urge to puke was just an effect of witnessing him puke, but then I felt the pain. At first, it was like gas discomfort, but then it moved. It moved! The pain wriggled in my guts, and I felt a hot column of vomit surge through my esophagus. I wasn't ready, and it exploded through my closed lips and out my nose in a blinding pain. The wriggling went deeper into my flesh, and soon I had joined my brother on the ground, the sound of my own retching vomit drowning him out as I shut my eyes and let the dark of my vision turn white, with the blinding pain that surged through me. I wasn't even aware of the hot refuse throttling out of my throat after a while, and time seemed to stop, as whatever it was in my guts gnawed away at my being and squirmed deeper into me than I thought possible. The scent eventually hit me and caused even more vomit to erupt from me and muddy the ground in which I writhed. It smelled sweet, like blackberries. As another acidic wave pulsed up through my throat, the blinding white turned to grey, and finally to black. I don't know how much time passed before I was nudged awake. I resisted opening my eyes, but a sudden flash of pain blasted my eyelids open as I rolled over into the mud and heaved. Nothing came of it except mucus and spit, and it was the same for the next 3 heaves. Finally, I got control of my breathing and focused on the pain. It wasn't like earlier, moving and squirming, but was instead localized in the middle of my guts. It felt like a throbbing mass, but it was manageable. My brother stood above me, his face and side caked with mud. He leaned on his walking stick and prodded me once again with his foot.
"We have to go home,"
he croaked weakly, still holding his stomach. I asked him if he had throbbing pain too, and he nodded. I stood up and I felt like every single one of my joints had sandpaper between them. Dried mud clung to my skin and shirt, smelling of blackberries and earth. But the throbbing pain, the want to get home, overpowered any will I had to brush off the dry dirt. I painfully retrieved my own walking stick, and we slowly made our way home. Each step was agony. The forest seemed like an endless plain of infinite trees, the songs of despair whistling through the leaves and branches on the light summer breeze. No birds chirped, and no animals scurried as we shuffled through the leaf-covered floor of the forest. Even though my brother walked next to me, a sense of singularity and doom descended upon me, and I felt that, at any moment, death would claim me for its own. An immense sadness pulsed through my veins, as the throbbing mass reminded me of my own mortality. There was no future to this life in that moment, and my only purpose was to suffer. As we made our way back to our house, 2 more surges of puke found their way through my mouth and onto the earth. My brother collapsed once.
We need homes, and Mum, Dad will help us."
I slurred as I painfully leaned over to help him. After what seemed like an eternity, we saw our house in the distance through the damnable trees and thicket. Our arms were scratched to hell from the branches and thorns of our crawl back to salvation, and the throbbing had moved once more through my gut. But the sight of home sparked a hope in me that I cannot describe. We stumbled drunkenly up the stairs to our front door and weakly turned the doorknob. The smell that greeted us extinguished the hope that our parents would help us. The scent of sweet blackberries and earth filled my nose. I collapsed onto the vomit-soaked carpet. My brother stumbled over me as hot tears of frustration and pain flowed down my cheeks. I was laying face to face with my mother, her own cheeks flushed red. I remember looking into her bloodshot eyes and thinking that this is how I must look. The whites of her eyes were red, and her skin, apart from the scarlet flush of her cheeks, was pale and clammy. A line of vomit and mucus dripped from her nose as her mouth lay open. Her labored breath blew the stench of the berry puke into my face, forcing a flow of my own refuse to flow out of my slack jaw. Her eyes widened as she erupted, splashing my face and mixing with my own. It was a vicious cycle until both of us heaved air. My brother having heard our wretches had convulsions of his own, and I felt his wetness creep over the carpet and soak my back. The bitter taste of it all lingered in my mouth, counteracting the sickly sweet smell. I watched as Mum's radiant blue eyes rolled back into her head, and her jaw opened more. Her breathing became more labored, and the fear of my own death was washed away, as the fear of my mother dying flooded my being. I summoned as much strength as the pain would allow and stood up, using the slippery wall as a support. My brother was curled into a fetal position as I stepped over him. I used the wall for support. As I searched for my dad in the stench-ridden house, I found him unconscious next to the phone, which lay on the floor. The same sickly sweet purge lay around him, and I knew that it had to have been the berries that made us sick. It was the only thing we all had in common. A sudden surge of pain throbbed through my guts and forced me to the floor, where I fell into the vomit-logged carpet. I rolled to my side, the floor moistly squelching beneath me, and I grabbed the phone. The simple act of walking to this point and reaching for the phone had taken all my energy. As my labored breath roughly ran through my burned throat, I dialed 911 and put the handset on speaker. After slurring an explanation to the 911 operator and giving her our home address, the darkness of unconsciousness dared to take me once again. That is, until the throbbing in my gut suddenly shot into my bowels. No, I cried pathetically, as I felt hot mush run down my side and pull into my pants leg. The throbbing pain was now a stream of burning heat that threatened to pull my insides out of me. It kept coming with splotches and eruptions of hot shit. Helpless sobs racked my body as I heard the same sounds erupt from my dad, and the stench of death arose from our bowels. I felt it flow out of the foot of my pants and into my shoes as I lay there, paralyzed. A new fear strung a chord within me as I felt something wriggling against my leg. No, not something. Many things. I felt the tiny stick of insect legs prick against my skin as whatever I released from my body crawled over my soiled form. It was alive, and it had been inside of me. Darkness finally took me as another spurt erupted from my bowels. I saw white when I woke up. At first, I thought that death had taken me, and that I was in the afterlife, but the beeping of my pulse told me otherwise. I became acutely aware of a needle in my hand and the uncomfortable angle of my bed. Hospital. I tried to sit up, but I was too weak. I turned my head and saw a nurse dressed in Minnie Mouse scrubs. I remember those damn scrubs so vividly. They are burned into my mind. I remember the look of shock, joy, and relief on the nurse's face as I asked for water. And I remember the sadness that moved across her smile, like day turning to night. I got my water and fell back to sleep, wondering why she had been sad. I came to what seemed like seconds later, but after I cleared my brain of fog, the same nurse in the same scrubs told me that it had been more than a week since I had asked for water. More IVs were stuck into my arms, and I felt, for the most part, okay. I could tell that she was hiding something from me in the way her sadness seemed to keep itself below her surface. I asked her why she was sad, and she said that I would have to wait for the doctor. Over the next 2 days, I slowly regained my strength by eating soft and liquid foods and walking slowly to the bathroom. The throbbing pains was no longer present, though my guts were very tender. On the 3rd day the doctor came in. He checked my vitals for himself, asked me how I was feeling, and then told me to ready myself because he had some bad news. I kinda already knew what he was going to say, and hot tears started to run down my face before he broke the news. Mum had succumbed to the berries. Her body had lost too many fluids. I cried and told him that none of this should have happened. They were only blackberries, I sobbed snottily into the doctor's lab coat. I cried until my tears had all been spent, and then I wailed until my lungs burned with acid and my throat turned to dust. The doctor held me the whole time, staying silent and squeezing me gently. I cried myself to sleep on his shoulder. I dreamed that my brother and I were back in the brambles, being stared at by the beast of the woods. No longer were its shoulders hunched. No longer were its eyes full of hate. Its matted hair swayed in the breeze as it approached us. Neither of us felt danger from the beast. It stopped a few feet in front of us, just behind the wall of brambles. It opened its maws, revealing hundreds of shiny, needle-sharp teeth. It spoke, its voice both deep and high-pitched, like the rumble of thunder intertwined with the shrill of summer cicadas. The ground is poisoned. All that grows here is sour, ill, dead. Do not eat again from the bitter earth. The price has been paid for your trespasses. It faded into the dark backdrop of the woods, and my dreams slowly merged into something beyond recall. Over the next week, I regained my strength through an hour of supplemental therapy a day, and started to eat solid foods. I was told that my brother and father had regained a good amount of their strength, and that they were on their way back to good health. At the end of the week, my dad and brother walked into my room along with a man I had never seen before. He introduced himself as a grief counselor. It was the normal, "What do you do now?" stuff, and he gave us a variety of resources and hotlines to aid us in the grievance and recovery. We hired a clean-up team to redo the house, and stayed in a motel about 30 minutes from home for the next 2 weeks. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, my brother noticed a large zit on the back of my leg. I looked down and saw a $half-dollar-sized red mound with a sickly white head. I looked at my brother and noticed that he had one just under his sleeve on his upper arm. We brought them up to our dad, and he said that he had noticed one on him as well. He told us not to pop them, as it might lead to an infection. Figuring that it would go away on its own, I snuggled into bed. The next morning I awoke into a dim light by a burning sensation in my leg. No, not just my leg, everywhere. I whipped back the covers and cried out in horror as I saw that my lower legs were covered in large zits, as were my arms, and I felt tender spots beneath my shirt. Horrified, I started bawling as I shook my brother awake to tell him, but he cried out in pain as I felt something ooze out of my hands. My dad was woken by the commotion and groaned in discomfort as he rolled in his bed to turn on the light and see what was happening. As the lights flooded the room, I saw that my brother was also covered in these mounds, and what's more, they were pulsing. I looked at my hand, where I felt the ooze, and reeled in disgust as I saw a maggot inch its way up my thumb. I fell onto the floor in my stupor, feeling my own zits burst like skin bubble wrap. I cried in pain as I got to my knees and felt worms, maggots, whatever they were, crawl from the zits all over me. One after another, they emerged from the popped infections and tumbled down me, covered in blood and pus. I heard the plap against the carpeted floor of the room.
"Oh my God!"
My dad shouted as he stumbled out of bed, his own infections popping audibly as he slammed into the wall. My brother was a bit more careful and painfully eased himself out of bed. Dad picked me up, the pressure from his grip allowing more maggots to crawl out of each of us, and bolted out of the door with my brother behind us. He went back to the hospital, and the emergency room balked at the sight of 3 people dripping maggots from their skin. The people in the waiting room either ran out in disgust or stared in horror. We were swept in immediately, and the same doctor that had let me unleash on his shoulder saw us once again. He stared, medically intrigued at the amount of maggots oozing out of our collective flesh. We were put in isolation and administered a number of drugs. After another stint in the hospital lasting 2 weeks, the maggot pools dried up. We had to have minor surgery done to remove each and every maggot pod. Luckily for all of us, each pod was only in the skin and surface muscle. They had avoided our more vital organs. The doctors were baffled. They drilled us with questions, and we all referred to the berries that had made us incredibly sick to begin with. A frozen sample of berries was taken from our home, and after just a few days of analyzing the berries, we received word on what had made us sick. Occipus laciniatus lays its eggs in the ripening fruit of blackberry bushes. The larvae of this beetle are incredibly small and eat the flesh and nectar of the fruit. The beetle only chooses the sweetest berries to lay its eggs in, and it does so by splitting open the berries and putting them inside. That day, when we gorged ourselves on the berries, we introduced hundreds of these larvae into our body. We had been being eaten from the inside out. This story was written by Zyto Rex. Well, wasn't that an eye-opening experience? The Sandman really does wonders when it comes to slumber. And what about our second story, the thought of your body being infested with insects? These creatures living in our bodies as parasites, oozing their way out of our pores. I hope no one was eating whilst listening to the second story. Now, a big thank you to my Patreons. You awesome people keep the blood of this show pumping. We have Matthew J. Bauer, Lee Bauer, Chad Warren, Just Heather, Lorraine Cressanto, Mace Joe, Paige Marcini, and Peter Raffaelli. A big shout out to Paige Marcini for our most recent supporter. Thank you so much for showing this show your love, and thank you to all my Patreon supporters who support the show. And lastly, a very special shout out to Matthew J. Bauer, who is totally supercharging my Patreon support page. When the new content comes to your lovely ears, listeners, it will be because of Matt Bauer. Thank you so much, man. Also, my internet is no longer on the piss, mate, so I'm going to catch up on emails and start doing a lot more research. Rest assured, I've been thinking about all of you, and the frustration of being unable to reply is frankly exhausting, to say the least. So, I'll be working hard to answer back in 2 days' time. This Wednesday, there's going to be some old-time radio episodes, I think, or if I can secure some different kinds of stories, which are a surprise, I'll share them with you early. Have yourself a cozy night or a sunshine-filled day. And as always, till next we meet.